Sounds of sharing Durian ASEAN.
Hey, good morning and hi. We return back with a 1 hour dialogue. Today we have our guest, Loong. How should I pronounce your name, by the way?
LL Koong.
LL Koong. That's a very cool name. So
L, long life.
So your longer name will be Long Ling Kong or Kong Ling Long.
Yeah.
So you are the chairman of the the National Council member and chairman
Of SMB.
of SME
Yeah.
for the CCCIM.
ACCCIM.
ACCCIM. That's a long acronym for Association for the Chinese Chamber
Of Commerce.
So, welcome to the office, to our office here in Durian ASEAN.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, and today you'll be talking about the future prospect of SMEs in ASEAN.
Yes.
And as we all know, the small and medium enterprises in Southeast Asia are vibrant, and especially in Malaysia alone, they constituted 90% of the total businesses. So you'll be sharing more about the on the micro aspect, which is you will touch on the ASEAN Economic Council and the future prospect of SMEs within the ASEAN Community 2015, as well as the micro aspect of how SME can function within the Southeast Asia territory and ASEAN plus, especially concerning China. So first of all, what is the current state of SME in Malaysia and also in Southeast Asia?
In fact, good morning to everyone. In fact, it's a Malaysian SME because governed a lot under the body called SME Corp. This SME Corp, we have the new definitions of the SME from the 1st of January this year, 2014. You know. Under the new definitions, who is SME? By the way, who is SME? SME have been classified as if your turnover is lesser than 50 millions, and then your full-time employee is 200 and below, you are SME. With these new definitions, Malaysia SME, I can say it's about 98.5% of our business establishment is SME. So this SME, how are we going to go out? Or we are waiting for someone to come into our market. This, I think, is more important because we are located in this heart of ASEAN.
So these are the differences between SME and MNC. They tend to stay put in their own comfort zone. Is that the case?
Yes, you have put it in the right way. That you see, what's MNC? MNC because when you do business, you have 4 factors. The most important factors is what I think is a capital. The capitals, MNC got a lot of capitals that can do wonders, right from the in-house R&D to marketing. What about SME? SME, the most important thing is limitations of the capital. Either you get it on your own generated funds, or you go for the loan from that means from the bank. You have to borrow from the banks. So with these limitations of the capital, how are we going to do? You see, because we have to rely on the market. Because the more sales that we get, rightfully, the more profits we should get. But at this point of times, we know the profit of the SME is getting tiny.
Oh, why is that so?
We're getting tiny because of the fierce competitions. Because when you compete, why buyer want to buy our products or our services? They will look at quality. On the other hand, they will look at the pricing. You see,
and mostly it's the MNC that will be the upper hand in terms of quality and pricing, isn't it?
Not so.
Not so, is it?
Not so, because SME can have more quality in terms of personnel, in terms of OEM productions, all these things for the rest of the market like MNC, all those things. But the pricing, the SME can be much lower than any MNC, but not to just let go in the quality per se. So this SME is very important to balance what is the quality, what is the pricing, So the profit becomes tiny. So this is the most important that our SME, we talk about for Malaysia first, our SME is facing these sort of problems. Problems of the, let's say if your pricing keep on coming down, then our expenses, we know our expenses escalating now. Expenses right from the raw materials to our, let's say, production's cost, manufacturing plants, all the rents and rates, all is going up. So when all are going up, so with these compressions, our profit becomes very tiny. With this minimum profit, how can we survive? That is very important.
Being part of the Associated Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry in Malaysia,
Yep.
is that the focus of your association to sort of push SME forward in terms of the way they do business within the huge market of the 600 million population of Southeast Asia?
Obviously, you see, ACCIM in Malaysia is the biggest chambers of the business community. Definitely, we are assisting our businessmen in, let's say, SME, because Malaysia SME is, as I said, 98.5% of the Malaysian business establishments. So, obviously, our members mostly is SME. So, SME, we are helping them on what? Internally and externally. How is it internally? Domestic, we will dialogue with the governments. For instance, let's say annual budget. Before our government come up with a budget, we will brief the governments in terms of memorandums. What are the SME issues? What are the, let's say, taxes? What are the incentives, for our Malaysia SME in order to go forward? Let's say external. For instance, recently we just concluded the Myanmar Expo. We brought about 300 SME to Myanmar for the business expo to get in touch with the ASEAN market. Last year we brought them to the Cambodia, to have a business matching. We call it business matching these sessions, and then to sell our products, to let our products to go abroad. If you go alone, you'll be very costly. If it comes together, as a group, let's say ACCIM organize this, it become much cheaper and very productive, for the rest of the, let's say, Myanmar, the rest of the businessmen in Myanmar to come forward to the expo center to look at our products, and then we will get in touch, personal, face-to-face, to the businessmen in Myanmar. So this is what SME is doing with the ACCIM.
So far, your observation in Malaysia's SME, I put it just in the Malaysian context. What are the challenges that they are facing right now? And also, what are their limitations that they need to overcome in order for them to be successful in the Southeast Asian market?
First of all, there are 2 points. Let's talk, what is Southeast Asia? Southeast Asia, we know, is ASEAN, AEC, ASEAN market. ASEAN market is 10 countries. So these ASEAN markets comprises about, I think, 600 millions of populations. So this is a huge market. So secondly is the this SME. You look at this SME, what are the constraints of SME? We may refer to the SME reports issued by the Bank Negara. Now, our main challenge is, where is our market? Second is capital. We lack of funds, because when we go forward to abroad, overseas market, or let's say from one state to another state in Malaysia, you need funds. The funds come from internally generated, or you get outside
Profit,
funds.
is it? Oh, outside.
Internally definitely is profit. You have to, that means generate on your own. Secondly, you have to go for, let's say, the bank loan. The bank loan. So bank loan, all those things, can we get it? That's why our bank is pushing a lot, to help the SME into. That means you have your own capital. In order to go forward. Because without capital, without all these facilities, we can't compete. We can't compete in the let's say overseas market. Let's say very simple. These two factors. Why? When we acquire raw materials from abroad, we must acquire in the, let's say, a buying house. If you don't have a buying house, you just go there individual. It become very costly. If it become very costly, you say business A or businessman A, very costly. When you acquire businessman B without any collaborations with the A, it becomes equally costly. If they collaborate, let's say becomes a buying house. Let's look at what Singaporean is doing. Then become buying house, the cost become much cheaper. When it become cheaper, then our profit will be sustained. So this is very challenging for our own SME. First of all, I think I should call for the mindset to be changed.
What sort of mindset change
is
required?
The mindset, we should not only concentrate on the local market. Yes, our population is growing, but we trap in the middle income traps. Our disposable incomes is not grow as fast as our expenses. So the market of 30 million of Malaysia, even though inclusive of East Malaysia, Sabah, Sarawak, we have only 30 million. But if we produce the products, because when we produce the products, let's say our furnitures or anything, we are the best something in the world of furnitures. Let's say we manufacture, our facility is fixed there. Our loan repayment is there. So how are we going to sell our products? That means we maximize our capacity of the productions. We cannot sell to 30 million. We have to look at ASEAN market. ASEAN market 600 million. Borderless. We should look at ASEAN market as our market. We look at Indonesia. It's already 1/3 of our ASEAN populations. Let's talk about GDP. Indonesia also 1/3 of our ASEAN GDP. So we have to go forward, on this one. Let's not to talk about ASEAN plus China. We will talk about this later.
I'm just curious to know because I've been reading reports that the inequality in Southeast Asia is actually quite high, and this is spurred by low wages throughout Southeast Asia. I'm not just mentioning Malaysia, but throughout Southeast Asia, and in this case, like with very low consumer power, buying power. In majority areas in Southeast Asia, how can businesses, spur up their business prospect in Southeast Asia?
As I mentioned just now, our incomes, let's talk from Malaysia point of view, middle income trap for the last, I think, more than 10 years. Middle income trap means that we trap in the some sort like 10,000. Last time is 7,000 to 10,000 US dollars, per annum incomes. We have to go forwards to let's say above 10,000, go towards 15,000, towards 2020 in order to become the developed nations. So with these incomes, let's look at other countries in the ASEAN. They are equivalent below. Let's say Mekong Rivers economics regions, the 4 countries. Let's put Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all these countries. Let's say Myanmar, all these countries, they are much, much below the middle incomes as defined by this World Bank. So with this, all these disposable incomes, we can only buy the products that is cost much lower. So how can an SME, let's say SME in Malaysia, if we know that all the products, let's say the buyer can only spend such amount of money, how can we produce some things that much more expensive? They won't buy. They won't buy
that's true. They won't buy
because they don't have such income. I should call it to be rightfully is disposable incomes. They don't have such disposable incomes, in order to acquire such a product. To them, it is let's say you buy a furniture. I rather buy a furniture much cheaper. So as a businessman, let's say much cheaper. How to produce things is much cheaper. You have to, let's say, compromise. with
But
the
that's
products.
killing business as well, and also it's killing quality, because as we all know, quality comes with a price tag, isn't it?
Obviously, as you mentioned, it's really killing the quality. When they kill the quality, our SME mindset, from the top management to the worker, they will continue to produce such a price tag product, compromise with the quality. So hence the outside world, let's say outside world, outside ASEAN, look at, this manufacturing particular industry in Malaysia is quite low quality. This will create a negative impact, So I think it's the mindset we have to change. We have to go for the quality products in order to let the outside world, the world market, to see, hey, Malaysia, you are a quality manufacturing plant, all those things, the products, in orders for them to buy.
A lot of the issues, especially economic issues especially in countries like Malaysia, are structural issues that the government can, change it. Should SME and government work together in terms of trying to set a more equitable policy for all Malaysians? For
in
example,
fact, our government have done a pretty good job and push forward, because from ACCIM point of view, let's say from the SME committee, since 2006, we have done a lot of survey, a lot of SME survey. Our survey, we will tap a lot of this mindset from the SME. What do you think about all this policy? Or what do you think about the challenges, all those things? We ask all sort of questions, in the various topics. So all this answer, we get it, we digest it, then we form memorandums. These memorandums we will submit to the governments, to the relevant agency and ministry. For example, taxes definitely we submit to the MOF, all those things. And then some we submit to the MITI, all those things. And then some is to Bank Negara, to let them see what are the challenges facing by our local SME, domestic SME. So the government definitely, when they look at all these things, they will form a policy in order to help the SME. For instance, let's say tourism. Tourism, how to help the tourism? The governments, let's say to inbound tour. That means inbound tours to get more foreigners to come to know Malaysia. Especially in the 2014
Visit Malaysia.
Yeah. How is it? The MOF they can do is from the Ministry of Finance is a tax incentive. If you bring in certain numbers of the tourists, 750 tourists, so once you are confirmed, you've been defined and classified as inbound for such a number above 750, then your incomes from this 750 will be tax exempted. So when you are tax exempted, that means the money will be safe. So you will plow back to the company in order to grow the company further. This is what Malaysian government, one of the very few examples, the Malaysian government is working together with the SME. Let's talk about the SME Corp. SME Corp have done pretty well in to govern 60 agency, all the funds, how to disperse to the SME, in terms of grant, some in terms of I call it soft loan. That means a low interest loan, in order to minimize the cost of finance, the cost of capitals of the SME. Because SME is not like MNC. They can just pay high interest in order to acquire any funds they like, So all these limitations of funds, the government is helping. So this, government also set up the CGC to credit guarantee corporations. If you don't have enough collaterals, they will just make up these collaterals, from the CGC in order for you to access to the fund. So all this, the government is working together with the SMB.
I'm just wondering, for ACCCIM, what kind of economic reform that you guys are pushing forward to the government in terms of trying to create a more enabling environment for SME in Malaysia to prosper, not just in Malaysia, but maybe in Southeast Asia as a whole?
You see, ACCIM being the biggest these business organizations, I should call it the business, let's say associations for the Malaysia. As I mentioned from the beginnings, the SME is our target. Because our Malaysians comprises 98.5% is SME. So we have a lot of all this. We not only have the SME survey, we also have the economic survey to tell the government. In fact, we are assisting and work hand in hand with the governments in order to look at the, just now I mentioned some of the funds. What about the policy? What about the budget, annual budget? You see, the annual budget, you cannot just concentrate on the MNC, on the bigger environments or macro things. In terms of micro, how do we assist the SME in order to be more competitive? Like GST, goods and services tax. We put forward, actually we had a survey, specifically for the GST, how many months, 18 months for instance, the SME would like to have for the preparations, then government hear it, then how can governments can help, in terms of the software acquisitions in order to prepare the SME to be this GST enabling, all those things. All this policy, actually we works and then dialogue. The governments, before they have any policy, they will call upon our ACCCIM reps in order to go forward for a dialogue, like minimum wages. Minimum wages, they sit in and then dialogues, consultations with the ACCCIM, how is this minimum wages affect the SME,
So will it affect SME positively or not?
Definitely, it affect SME. It affect SME because our minimum wages about 900 in the Peninsula Malaysia and 800 across to the Sabah and Sarawak East Malaysia. Because this 900 is the across the board in the Peninsula. What about those in the urban area and then in rural area? Is very different. Let's put it Kuala Terengganu, and then to the heart of the KL. It's a similar 900, but it's not applicable.
The cost of living is different.
Cost of living definitely totally different. But what about the manufacturing plants in those areas? So it is affected. Definitely is affected. So all those things we put forward. We study, we put forward. Because ACCCIM also have a social economic research center. We call it SEARCH. So we do a lot of research on this one. It's a special unit, in the ACCCIM in-house, in order to help our Malaysian SME, to go forward and then to help our Malaysian SME in orders, because to dialogue with the government. Because you cannot have one SME go and tell the government what's going on.
Yeah, that's definitely not working.
Yeah.
You have to go in a pack, isn't it?
Yeah, then you cannot stay, just shout in the newspaper, all those. You cannot do it, but we have to go. As you mentioned, we go as a groups. ACCCIM has a structural study, and then the structures, the mindset formulations in order to get the government to understand what is SME, who is SME.
Can you share more of the economic survey that you mentioned earlier? Like, what are the findings? Maybe notable ones in terms of the Malaysia SME.
You see, notable one, I still can remember, he creates a lot of voices in Malaysia from the capitals, Let's say lack of funds, The SME, the client for said, I don't have funds, When I go to the bank, I hardly can get it. When I hear a lot of grants and incentive, But how comes when I apply, it's been rejected, All these things. When we survey, we see a lot comes up with all these things. But on the other side, the government's statistic shown that all the fund, all the, let's say, outstandings of the loans, is growing year on year. And then the statistics show is growing. But how comes a huge number of SME, they say, I didn't get it. So this one we survey, we find out we tackle. Then we goes to governments there, Bank Negara. We dialogue. We put forward to the SME development unit in the Bank Negara, so they understand what are the things, what are the SME wanted. Because when we talk about SME, let's say we talk about 50 millions, we talk about 200 employees. What about those 10 million? Let's say 10 million turnover. Let's say 50 employee is still quite sizable. But don't forget, Malaysia majority above 70%, around 70%, I think is micro, below 5 employees.
I see.
Those
70% are businesses with 5 employees or less.
Yes,
is that the case?
Yes, 5 employees. Because a lot of micro. Malaysia consists a lot of micro. So this micro, if they don't grow, they will continue to stay put at what they are. Then they will face out one day in the market because of fierce competitions. Because when you are small, they don't have economic skill. It's not like those giants. So when you're small, how are you going to compete? How to compete? You compete by way of personal service. You compete by way of a good quality. Then your profit will becomes, I call it not tiny profit, it becomes nano profit. Nano profit is too small.
Too small to even count as a profit, a real profit, isn't it?
Too small. You see, then how? If you are too small, how can you pay salary? So your workers, your employee turnover is very high. The turnover rate. When the turnover rate is very high, your economic of skill, learning curve of the employee is not there.
It will be affected as well. I mean, for any employees having a good career path, especially if employers can, provide that, it will benefit the companies itself, isn't it? Having more loyalty among employees.
You talk about loyalty. That is detrimental factor to the SME. Why? SME, they don't have the profit in order to pay you more. They don't have extra profit to pay you bonus per se. They even don't have extra money to train you, to send you for technical trainings, all those things.
Isn't that a catch-22 situation? Because at one hand, on workers, among workers, they want their rights to be preserved, especially when it comes to having a more decent work and wages. At the same time, especially SME, I mean, in this context, they themselves are trapped, in a station where they can't really, get enough profit to even get the business going on, isn't it? So how can we solve this kind of catch-22 situation?
You see, when you talk about a catch-22, we are not like those 20th century. That time's gone now. Because when we set up business, let's say I want to set up a business, I want to do a business. Straight away, I compete with a lot of in the market. So when I compete, let's say you want to be in KL. What about the rent? The rent is so high until you can't bear it. So when you do this, you don't have the extra funds, I call it, to provide, as I mentioned just now, the employees' benefit. So how the government, in order, because our governments, we cannot just work, let's say separately, from the business, Now it's a business-driven, economics, of countries. You see, our governments know this fact is very well. So how to help, how to assist, because a business, you just cannot say, I go into the market, I'm a big way. I go into the market, I can advertise a newspaper, I go to the markets, I am a big SME. Cannot be. Everyone from the small. So from small, how long you trap in the small? That is the most important. If you trap in the small for very long, I think you become smaller. You phase out, So how governments can help the SME in order to overcome, go over this, I call it small and the micro in a faster way, helps them to grow. That's why the governments provide a lot of this soft loan, low interest in order to make the borrowings, the capital much cheaper in order for them to go forward, So this is what ACCIM is doing, and then we are doing, and then the government is listening, and then we work very hard on this.
This might not be related directly to SME, but I think you mentioned something very interesting, which is the high property prices, especially in urban areas like KL, Kuala Lumpur. In that sense, right, I think it affects both employers and employees, because I think the high rent and high property prices take up a lot of the, I would say, chunk of wages or even income from businesses and from workers. And do you, in your own opinion, do you think if the government can regulate the prices of property in urban areas especially, this can actually help indirectly towards SMEs growth?
In fact, that is, I can call it, you mentioned about property prices over here. They are direct and indirect, can affect this SME. If I say direct, it definitely is a rent. Let's say you look at Singapore, you look at Hong Kong, you see, the rent is exorbitant, that why they still can do business. We are wondering. Then if you look at businesses in Hong Kong or businesses in Singapore, if you look back to our Malaysians domestic business, the rent is so cheap as compared to what is in Hong Kong and in Singapore, But why they can do it? Why can't we, So the property prices, actually the rent, it definitely will go up. It will go up from times to times. You cannot say, I think next year will be lower. I think something wrong with the economy. You say next 5 years will be lower like that, So when it go up, it definitely go up because of demand and supply. And then it depends on locations, there are, and then it depends on the let's say, the businesses. When you have more businesses in that area, the property prices will go up. I said the commercial properties, and then the rents will go up. Let's say you look at KL Selangor, you look at Penang, you look at JB, and you look at Kota Kinabalu. You look at these four cities, the prices will keep on going up. But just now you mentioned, how can the government or the government has done anything to curb all this increase in the prices? Definitely, the government have been doing. For instance, in the last budget, in terms of the real property gain tax, we increased the real property gain tax in order to curb the prices. And another thing is, we have the, after the RBGT.
Yeah.
You see, after the RBGT, we have another one is the foreigner. How foreigner can buy the property? You see, from 500,000 increased to 1 million. All these things we are looking after. We are looking after the local, our local purchasers, of the house buyer, in order not to let the foreigners to buy the property in. That means in a box, So 500,000 increase to 1 million. All this is the government policy. They are trying. Our government is trying to stabilize the property prices, But however, in the big city, the rent is still going up.
Yeah,
the rent is still going up.
That's the reality. I mean, and sometimes it goes out way beyond the market really demands it, because land itself is a fixed commodity in a way that people need to stay, in one place, and owners of that land property owners can simply, rank up the price without even considering whether it's part of the market demand and supply, isn't it?
In fact, why is the rents go up? The rents go up because the area, we have businesses. There are businesses over there. Because when you have more businesses, you are doing business, a lot of demand for shop lots or anything. Second factor is, in that particular city, when you have a lot of colleges and university, obviously, let's say the condominiums, the apartments, this one is good demands. That's why the price will not come down. So it affect the business. Definitely, it affect business, but it's also affect positively. You got more population. There's more demand for the particular product and services. We have to look at both sides. We cannot say, "Oh, I want a cheaper rent. I can set up offices." Or I set up my business way low populations, then you don't have demand. You see all the mini market, all the supermarket, they will go into the highly populations area, unless you are manufacturing plant. You see, manufacturing plant also you have to look at the logistic, and then the worker, whether you can easily get the workers or not. All this thing is I call it is a circle. It ties up together in order to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the businesses and economy.
Okay, let's move on to a more micro perspective on the SME. So let's start with the ASEAN Economic Council, AEC. So what is your view on that?
Oh, this is also a macro, I think. We look at ASEAN as we started just now. The ASEAN 10 countries, 10 countries. I always split the ASEAN into top fives and bottom
really?
fives. Yeah. The top fives, not in terms of any figures of top fives, in terms of the geographical area.
Okay.
The fives is a Mekong Rivers economics, and then comprises, let's say, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and then Myanmar and Thailand, and then below I think the Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei,
and the Philippines,
Indonesia, Philippines, all this. You see, all these 10 countries. What are we doing? We have set up this economics AEC, corporations, in order to have stronger economics tied up. Because let's say we are individual, let's put it Malaysia alone, or let's say Indonesia alone, can they fight with the rest of the world, the rest of the world, you got Euro, all those things, and then the America, all those, you can't fight. So with the cooperations together, and then together we can have this power as a what, especially borderless. We talk about borderless, That's why it comes to 2015, full force of these ASEAN's, we call it 0 to 5% duty free,
I see.
These customs, they are keep on coming down, all this thing, So this will encourage the movements of the goods and services amongst these countries, because if you move, let's say, prior to all these collaborations, you might incur some extra costs. That is duty and taxes. So with this, we less duty and taxes. Some even now go to zero duty and taxes. So you can move freely. That means, like a Malaysian, for Malaysia, we don't look at 30 million populations as our market. We look at the whole
600 million.
600 millions. So when we do business, wow, we are staying in a country of 30 millions, but our market is 600 millions. How wonderful is that? That is how ASEAN basically is working. Secondly, ASEAN have signed that means have collaborations with China. There's ASEAN plus China. We call it 10 plus 1. With this 10 plus 1, when the China come in, it's a huge population. That means 600 millions plus 1.3 B. It almost comes to 1.9 to 2 B. It's almost 1/3 of the world population.
That's true.
If you say
half of the population,
I can say that this about 1/3 of the world population is the world biggest, with the huge populations free trade zone. So with this, a lot of China products might come in. A lot of Malaysian products, you get two stages. Once you go to ASEAN, secondly you go to this China. So this one in terms will help the Malaysian businessmen, especially the SME.
But do you think this is more of an opportunity or a threat to local businesses? Because in the earlier discussion, you mentioned that our local businesses are still stuck in that comfort zone, within the domestic market. Are they ready to tap into the ocean?
We should not say, are we ready? Or are they ready or not? Should be ready by now.
They have to be ready
if you're
by
not
now.
ready by now, I think you'll be phasing out. You'll be phasing out. Because the reality is, it's already started. The ASEAN plus China already started, With 2015, the ASEAN is full force now. So with this, you see, we have the industrial zone in Nanning in China. China have one this in our Kuantan. This China-Malaysia industrial park over here. With all this in place, we are very fast moving, So SME have to follow the pace and move much faster than all this government policy, I should call it, So, you see, Malaysia SME, how can we do that? Likewise to the rest of the ASEAN SME. If we don't go out, they will come in. We have to go out to their countries in order to, I should call it, capitalize on this opportunity to tap into their market. If you say either it is opportunity or it is a threat, I think it's two-way, two-way sword like that. So if you have more opportunity, obviously you will just fade out the threat, Because as I mentioned, if we don't change our mindset, we still stay where we are, and then in Malaysia, as you mentioned just now, in the comfort zone, then we just stay here, and then we just earn our tiny profit. We say, it's enough. This tiny profit, One day we'll see wipe up our profit, We'll be phasing out, because as I put it one example, let's say a Chinese product with zero duty or very low duty comes to Malaysia, So happen you are manufacturing the same products of what is imported by other agent, Then you'll find out how comes I manufacture in Malaysia, the cost, even the cost of manufacturing of this particular products, it is higher than the selling price of this imported products. When you look at the quality, almost similar, But look at the pricing. Those who import from China much cheaper even than my cost. So how are we going to sell? How are we going to survive? It's not to mention that our product is expensive. Actually, the cost of acquisition of our raw material, our input, is too expensive, too costly, because our sourcing problems. So all these things, overnight, you will see the buyer will not buy anything from us. So overnight, our facility, I say manufacturing facility, everything will stop.
Can you explain more about the sourcing problem that, in comparison to countries like China?
You see, sourcing, as a SME, you have to, there's two ways. How to make a profit? Very simple. This simple accounting. You either increase the sales or you reduce the expenses. So, increased sales is towards the marketing. So, let's talk about the expenses, the purchases, the cost of purchases. When we purchase some things, we have to purchase as low as possible in order to maximize our profit. If we go and purchase something from, let's say, China, a raw material, we go alone. How they look at us? When you go alone, because your quantity is not as huge as what they expected, So definitely the pricing will not be low, If let's say Malaysian SME set up, I called upon the SME set up a buying house. That means this buying house will go and source this raw material with this bulk purchase. Then you have the demand power. With this bulk purchase, definitely you can get a better products, better quality of the raw material with the cheaper cost. With this, then our cost of acquisitions will be much lower. This is our sourcing. We have this issue in Malaysia.
What about in terms of penetrating the Chinese market? what about the socio-economic dimension of it? Because I mean, in Southeast Asia, not everyone speaks Mandarin, and not everyone are aware of the Chinese culture. So how can they penetrate into that particular market?
In fact, yes, to a certain extent, it is true that we have to understand the culture. We have to speak Mandarin, But this is not a deterrent effect of the business, Business, when you look at the products, you don't need to look at the what language you are going to talk about, because otherwise you say, oh, Russian market, I can't speak Russian, Then for US, I can't even speak Malay. How can I come to Malaysia? I don't think that's the way. Because the products is a generic. To me, it's a generic. It's the acceptance to the consumer. That is the products. When there is a services, it is consumed, by this consumer. That is a good services, So languages is not a barrier to me. Languages, unless your products do not have the quality and do not have the pricings that your buyer want, I think that will be a disaster. That means the people won't buy from you. Yeah.
So, okay, let's go back to ASEAN. Do you think ASEAN has laid out a clear blueprint for SME in Southeast Asia to prosper and compete, not just within the Southeast Asian territories, but also with their partners, the ASEAN Plus?
Definitely, ASEAN have laid out all this for the SME, and then it's also laid out for the big MNC also, For in fact, ASEAN is for the business establishments, Let's talk about business first, Do not talk about cultural aspect, The business definitely laid out all these things for the SME to go forward, for a free market, for a fair competitions, and then everyone on the same platforms and compete, and then there is no cluster, there is no, let's say, you protect. That means to protect your market, protectionisms, all those things, Definitely laid out all these things. When he laid out all these things, our Malaysian SME have to pay particular attention to this. Why? If you have this, I call it the similar products or similar service that what you are having, so you will face the fierce competitions on this, From comebacks to our Malaysia, definitely Malaysia have blueprints for the SME, because we got National SME Council, and then work very hard, chaired by our Prime Ministers, work very hard to helps the SME in terms of from the policy to the way of our SME want to do in this business in order to compete not only in Malaysia, in the ASEAN, and then goes to ASEAN plus China, some things like that.
I see. So in that sense, we are moving forward in a way, not just in Malaysia, but ASEAN as a whole. So what about in terms of investment, like especially foreign direct investment? A lot of countries in Southeast Asia, they don't really have that particular funds compared to like more powerful countries like, China and all that. Are we getting more should we get more FDI, and are we getting more of it?
This question is obviously we have to get more FDI. In fact, the statistic announced by our MITI, Ministry of International Trade, this FDI is increasing, from last year. In fact, our trades with this China is also increasing, because we are the biggest trading partners of China in terms of Southeast Asia, ASEAN, And then in terms of their partners to China in Asia, we are number 3 for China after Japan and Korea. So I think Malaysia is working towards that, becomes the more and more importance in this, I call it a trade, with the ASEAN countries and this China.
But why do you think Southeast Asia is an attractive avenue for FDI to flow in, considering that we have quite a huge number of human rights violation and other, improper practices that might, get other countries, especially Western countries, from investing in Southeast Asia? What do you think of this?
Let's talk about the 21st century now. 20th century is already gone because in the past we are concentrate a lot in the Western, in the West. So now the economy is moving from the West to the East. It's obviously because the rise of the China, and then ASEAN is a place for the investors to come in to tap into China market. Yeah.
Oh.
And then let's talk about the in China, what they want. You see, in China, government policy is they want to go out. They want to go out in order to they go to a Nasdaq market, and then our capital market must be strong in order to attract them. When we attract them, and then the foreign investor will come in, and then especially Malaysia. If foreign investor come in for the halal hub, Chinese businessmen also come in for the halal hubs, So all the certifications by our halal JAKIMs, then you can in turn sell it to the Middle East, becomes their market, And then I call it cost of production is quite low. In fact, in the ASEAN market, So, and then our infrastructures is not bad, and then our talent, a lot of talents in this ASEAN, for them to come in, as compared to let's say you go to Australia, it's very far. If you go to Africa, it's not there, but ASEAN now is facing a fierce competition from the South America,
South
South
America.
Americas, yeah. So a lot of business FDI will go into South America rather than ASEAN. So ASEAN plus China, we have to be much stronger after 2015 in order to attract the FDI.
Especially when it comes to key issues like are the region a more peaceful region? Is it safe for business to function there?
It must. It is most important factors. When these foreigners set up business over here, they must be very stable, and then political stability, and then economics, and then your infrastructures, must be well in place, in order for them to, I call it, do business over here. Yeah.
I see. So in that sense, do you think the future prospect of getting more investment is still a long way? I mean, foreign direct investment, or are we on the right track?
I should not say in the long way. In fact, we are getting, it's increasing the FDI, in Malaysia, and then in ASEAN as well, and then we are definitely on the right tracks,
Which are the majority FDI comes from?
You see, from now on, our FDI a lot is from Asia, from Asia, You see, Singapore also comes a lot, But surprisingly, China does not come as much as what we expected, Because can you imagine, we invest in China more than a Chinese company invest in Malaysia, That's why we called upon Chinese investor come forward and invest in Malaysia, because Malaysia have a diverse cultures, everything, for them to set up anything, right from the let's say high-tech industry, to any good manufacturing plants. Malaysia definitely is a place.
So I guess the Malaysian government and also Malaysian SME has to work harder in terms of attracting more Chinese businessmen to the Malaysian shore. In that case,
not only work harder. I think Malaysian governments and the SME have to work hand in hand. Hand in hand, collaborate well, and then to attract the FDI, especially from this part of the world, the Chinas to come into Malaysia, because China is the second largest world economy in the world. For times to come, it becomes the biggest in the world. So we have to attract them to move forward. If they are going out, why not comes to Malaysia and comes to ASEAN? That's what we are looking for.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we are looking for. So your last, anything to add on in terms of the future prospects of SMEs in Malaysia?
In fact, the future is very bright. The future is very bright in terms of this, I call it young market, ASEAN. In 2015, it fully implements, and then the ASEAN plus China. China will look at the ASEAN, especially Malaysia, is the platforms for them to invest, and then platforms for them to look. That means that goes into other market, especially our halal hub, all those things, and then our technology, and then technology park, and then our Malaysia China industrials park in Kuantan, all those things. That's why our SME have to change the mindset, and then work very hard in order to become the satellite industry of this big MNC, especially those who come from China. We becomes their satellite supplier or service provider to them, So I think the future will be very bright for the SME.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Koong, Loong.
Thanks a lot.
And thanks for coming and sharing with us such an in such full insight on the SMEs future prospect in Asia and also Southeast Asia as well as in China. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.